Everyone laughed when a millionaire adopted two blind 9-year-old sisters. Years later, they returned in a luxury helicopter. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see. Now, on to the story. The gentle applause echoing through the auditorium did nothing to calm Thomas Harrington's racing thoughts. At 45, the self-made tech magnate had everything money could buy, yet the emptiness in his life seemed to grow with each passing day. He sat, adjusted his perfectly tailored suit, and scanned the room filled with young mathematical prodigies and their proud parents. This annual competition was his way of giving back, finding brilliant minds who needed financial support to reach their potential, just as he once had. Next contestants, Emma and Lily Spencer, announced the moderator. Thomas's attention was drawn to two identical girls being guided to the stage by a woman wearing a name tag from Oakwood Children's Home. What caught his eye wasn't just their matching navy dresses or synchronized movements. It was the white canes they skillfully used to navigate the steps. The Spencer twins will now attempt to solve the advanced calculus problem on screen, the moderator explained, an unmistakable note of doubt in his voice. Thomas leaned forward, intrigued. The girls couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and they were blind. The audience whispered skeptically as the complex equation was read aloud. The twins stood quietly, their faces turned slightly toward each other as if sharing a secret conversation. Then, simultaneously, they began to speak, their voices overlapping in perfect harmony as they worked through the problem step by step, faster than most adults could follow. The answer is 3.14159.265, approximating pi, they concluded in unison, exactly 43 seconds later. Stunned silence fell over the auditorium before erupting into thunderous applause. Thomas found himself on his feet, a strange emotion tightening his chest as he watched the girls' serene smiles. They didn't just solve the problem. They had done it with an elegance that suggested they were merely scratching the surface of their capabilities. After the competition, Thomas couldn't resist approaching them. "That was extraordinary," said, crouching to their level. "I'm Thomas Harrington." Both girls turned toward his voice with uncanny precision. "We know who you are, Mr. Harrington," said one twin. "Your voice matches the TED Talk you gave last year on quantum computing," added the other. "I'm Lily and this is Emma." The caretaker from the children's home smiled apologetically. "The girls remember everything they hear. It's quite remarkable. How long have you been at Oakwood?" Thomas asked gently. 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days, Emma answered promptly. "Since the car accident." Thomas felt a pang in his chest. "Your parents?" Lily nodded, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his. "They were scientists. Dad always said our brains were our greatest gift." "We miss them," Emma added simply. Something shifted inside Thomas in that moment, a recognition that defied logic. These brilliant minds, these extraordinary children, were languishing in an underfunded state facility. The similarity to his own childhood struck him like a physical blow. "Would you like to come work for my foundation?" he asked impulsively. "We could offer specialized education, opportunities." "Mr. Harrington," interrupted the caretaker. "The girls aren't available for employment. They're children who need a family." The twins' faces remained impassive, but their grip on their canes tightened ever so slightly. Thomas stood, a decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. "Then I'll give them one," he said, the words surprising even himself. "I want to adopt them." The statement hung in the air, electrifying and impossible to retract. In the stunned faces around him, Thomas saw disbelief, concern, and skepticism. But when he looked back at the twins, he saw something else entirely, a flicker of hope they were too afraid to nurture. And in that moment, Thomas Harrington, the man who calculated every business decision to the last decimal point, made the most impulsive choice of his life, a choice that would change everything. Thomas Harrington's announcement sent shockwaves through his corporate empire. The morning headlines were merciless. Tech billionaire's publicity stunt adopts blind twins, and Harrington's latest acquisition, children. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the news broke. "You've lost your mind," declared Vanessa Chen, his chief legal counsel, pacing his penthouse office. "The board is in panic mode and Marcus Reynolds is already suggesting a psychiatric evaluation." Thomas gazed out at the Manhattan skyline, unmoved. "Let them talk." "It's not just talk," Vanessa persisted. "We've spent years building your image as a calculating business genius. Suddenly you're adopting two special needs children with no preparation? The optics are terrible." Thomas turned, his expression hardening. "Optics? Is that what we're calling compassion these days?" Their argument was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. James Whitman, a renowned specialist in gifted children. The twins sat in the adjacent room, exploring the space with methodical precision. "Mr. Harrington, I've completed my preliminary assessment," Dr. Whitman began, his voice hushed with amazement. "Their cognitive abilities are extraordinary. IQs well above 180, and that might be an underestimation." "I knew they were smart, but—" "Smart doesn't begin to cover it," the doctor interrupted. "These girls have what we call complementary cognition. Emma processes information sequentially with perfect recall, while Lily thinks in complex patterns and abstractions. Together they create a system of thought that's unprecedented." Vanessa looked skeptical. "So they're good at math?" "It's far more than that," Dr. Whitman continued. "They've developed an internal language to communicate complex concepts between themselves. Their minds appear to have rewired to compensate for their blindness, creating enhanced neural pathways. In my 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like it." Thomas sat down, absorbing this information. "What about their blindness? Is there any treatment?" "They lost their sight in the same accident that killed their parents. The damage is permanent," Dr. Whitman explained. "But Mr. Harrington, these children don't need fixing. They've adapted in remarkable ways." The conversation was interrupted by the twins entering the room without assistance, navigating perfectly despite having been there only once before. "You're discussing our test results," Lily stated matter-of-factly. "We could hear through the wall. The acoustic properties of the room create a natural amplification," Emma added. "We counted 14 steps from the couch to this doorway, accounting for the slight elevation change at the threshold." Thomas smiled while Vanessa and Dr. Whitman stared in astonishment. "Mr. Harrington, can we ask why you want to adopt us?" Emma's question cut through the room. Thomas hesitated, aware of the scrutiny from Vanessa and the doctor. "Because I recognize something in you that no one recognized in me," he finally said. "Potential that shouldn't be wasted. And because—" He paused, surprising himself with his own honesty. "I think we might need each other." The twins' expressions remained neutral, but their posture shifted subtly. "They said you were doing it for publicity," Lily said. "Or to exploit our abilities," Emma added. Thomas knelt before them, speaking with quiet intensity. "I don't care what they say. This isn't about publicity or exploitation. This is about giving you the home you deserve." For the first time, a small smile appeared on both girls' faces simultaneously. "We believe you," they said in unison. As they left the room, Vanessa approached Thomas. "The board meeting is tomorrow. Marcus is bringing his full artillery against this adoption." Thomas watched the twins disappear down the hallway, their movements perfectly synchronized despite the darkness that surrounded them. "Let him try," he said. The boardroom of Harrington Tech Solutions buzzed with tension. 14 executive board members sat around the gleaming table, while Marcus Reynolds, the company's ambitious VP, stood at the head, his presentation concluding with a damning financial projection. "As you can see, Thomas's impulsive decision poses significant risks to shareholder value," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "The adoption of 2 blind children by our CEO sends a troubling message about his decision-making capabilities." Thomas sat quietly, observing the faces around him. Some avoided his gaze while others nodded along with Marcus's assessment. "Perhaps most concerning," Marcus continued, "is the distraction factor. Raising special needs children requires extraordinary time and resources. Time our CEO simply doesn't have." The word special needs hung in the air like poison. Thomas felt his patience evaporating. "Are we finished?" Thomas asked, his voice dangerously calm. Marcus smiled thinly. "I believe I've covered the essential concerns." Thomas stood slowly. "Then allow me to address them." He walked to the center of the room, surveying the executives he'd personally hired over the years. "I founded this company with nothing but determination and a second-hand laptop," he began, "when none of you would give me the time of day. When investors laughed me out of their offices, when I was sleeping on a friend's couch eating ramen noodles." Paused, making eye contact with each board member. "Now you sit in Italian leather chairs earning seven-figure bonuses, telling me that I'm making poor decisions?" He shook his head. "Marcus, you've prepared quite the presentation. Yet nowhere did you mention that Emma and Lily Spencer have the highest recorded IQs of any children their age in the country." Murmurs rippled through the room. "But that's beside the point," Thomas continued. "Even if they were average children, my decision would stand. Because 20 years ago I was an orphan too, a kid with potential that everyone overlooked." The revelation stunned the room. Thomas had always been private about his past. "What's most disappointing," Thomas said, "is that we've spent millions on PR campaigns about inclusion and diversity. We've plastered our website with promises about making technology accessible to all. Yet the moment I actually live those values, you call it a distraction." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Thomas, we're simply concerned about—" "Save it," Thomas interrupted. "I've heard enough concerns. Here's what's going to happen. I'm adopting Emma and Lily. The paperwork is already in process. And here's something else you should know. I've established a trust that guarantees my voting shares pass to them if anything happens to me." Gasps echoed around the table. "So you have two choices," Thomas continued. "Work with me or work against me. But understand that those girls are my family now, and I protect my family." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Marcus? That presentation you spent all night preparing? There's a calculation error on slide 17. I suspect Emma and Lily would have caught it in seconds." The boardroom remained silent as the door closed behind him. In the hallway, Thomas exhaled slowly, the weight of confrontation lifting from his shoulders. His administrative assistant approached, cautiously. "Sir, the social worker is here with the girls. They're waiting in your office." Thomas nodded, straightening his tie. The battle with the board was just the beginning, but for the first time in years, he felt absolute clarity about his path forward. As he walked toward his office, he could hear the twins' voices engaged in animated conversation about the acoustic properties of the building. Despite everything, he smiled. Let Marcus and the board plot against him. They had no idea what was coming. The real revolution was about to begin in the form of two 9-year-old blind girls who would change not just his life, but the future of everything he had built. The gates of Harrington Estate opened silently as Thomas's Bentley pulled up the winding driveway. Seated beside him, Emma and Lily tilted their heads slightly, processing the sounds around them. "The gravel has a different texture here," Emma observed, "more uniform than at the children's home. And there are birds," added Lily. 17 distinct calls since we entered the property, mostly northern cardinals and American robins." Thomas glanced at them with amazement. "You can identify birds by their songs?" "Our hearing adapted after we lost our sight," Lily explained matter-of-factly. "The ornithology audiobooks at the library were quite helpful." As the car stopped, Mrs. Bennett, Thomas's longtime housekeeper, stood waiting on the steps. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Thomas could read the apprehension in her posture. "Welcome home," Thomas said, helping the girls from the car. "Mrs. Bennett has been with me for 15 years. She knows this house better than I do." The elderly housekeeper gave a stiff nod. "I've prepared the East Wing rooms as requested, Mr. Harrington." Thomas had spent the past week transforming part of his mansion for the twins' arrival. Textured wallpaper for navigation, braille labels on every door, and a state-of-the-art sound system that allowed voice control of the entire house. "May we explore?" asked Emma. Thomas hesitated. "Of course, but I should show you around first. The house is quite large and we'll create a mental map," Lily interrupted confidently. Distance, texture, acoustics, and scent markers. We just need to walk it once. Mrs. Bennet frowned. Perhaps it would be safer if... Let them try, Thomas said quietly. I suspect they know what they're doing. For the next hour, Thomas watched in astonishment as the twins methodically explored the first floor, trailing their fingers along walls, counting steps, and occasionally stopping to listen to how sounds echoed in different spaces. They moved, with increasing confidence, rarely hesitating at corners or doorways. By dinner time, Mrs. Bennet's skepticism had begun to soften. The twins had navigated to the dining room without assistance, found their chairs, and even complimented her on the subtle lavender scent of the freshly laundered napkins. I thought we might read together after dinner, Thomas suggested, still searching for ways to connect. I have a library full of books, and we could start with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Emma suggested eagerly. Or The Secret Garden, added Lily. Thomas smiled. Either would be perfect. I'll read whichever you prefer. The twins exchanged their silent communication. Actually, Lily said hesitantly, we could read to you. That evening in the library, Thomas watched in wonder as the girls took turns reciting The Secret Garden from memory, complete with different voices for each character. They hadn't simply memorized the words, they embodied the story with emotion and nuance that brought tears to his eyes. That was extraordinary, he whispered when they finished chapter 3. How many books have you memorized? 217, Emma replied precisely. The children's home had a limited library, and we read quickly. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Thomas found Mrs. Bennet in the kitchen. There, not what I expected, the housekeeper admitted, her earlier reserve melting. Those girls, they're something special. Thomas nodded, pouring himself a small whiskey. They're teaching me more than I could ever teach them. They need you all the same, Mrs. Bennet said softly. Brilliant as they are, they're still children who've lost everything. Thomas stared into his glass, thinking of the empty years behind him and the uncertain ones ahead. Maybe we need each other, he said quietly. Outside the kitchen window, the vast grounds of Harrington Estate stretched into darkness, a darkness that no longer seemed so empty or so cold. 3 months into the adoption, Thomas's life had transformed, beyond recognition. His penthouse office, once a sanctuary of minimalist design, now featured tactile wall maps and 3D printed models of the company's latest products, all created for the twins to understand his work. Mr. Harrington, your 10 a.m. video conference starts in 5 minutes, his assistant reminded him through the intercom. Thomas sighed, reviewing the documents for the crucial product launch meeting. The new Harrington neural interface was behind schedule, and the engineering team had been working around the clock to fix the underlying mathematical model. Girls, I need to take this call in my office, he called out. Mrs. Bennet will help you with your lessons. Emma and Lily, who had been sitting nearby working on their custom Braille tablets, turned toward his voice. Is this about the neural interface problems? Lily asked innocently. Thomas froze. How do you know about that? We overheard your phone call yesterday, Emma explained. The algorithms they're using to predict neural response times have a fundamental flaw. Thomas knelt beside them, suddenly alert. What kind of flaw? They're applying standard processing models to non-standard neural pathways, Lily said, her fingers dancing across her Braille display. The brain doesn't process information linearly. We wrote some equations that might help, Emma added, holding out a sheet of paper covered in Braille dots that Thomas couldn't read. Thomas hesitated, then made an impulsive decision. Would you like to join my meeting? 10 minutes later, the twins sat quietly beside Thomas as his engineering team appeared on the large screen. The chief engineer, Dr. Patel, was in the middle of explaining their latest roadblock. And that's why we're looking at another 6-week delay, minimum. The quantum processing speeds just don't match our projections once we... Have you considered a nonlinear progression model? Thomas interrupted. Dr. Patel blinked in surprise. We've tried several approaches, but the computational requirements become unmanageable. What if you applied a parallel processing framework instead? Thomas suggested, glancing at the notes. His assistant had hastily translated from the twins' Braille equations. As the discussion grew more technical, Emma suddenly spoke up. "You're thinking about it wrong." The engineers fell silent, staring at the 9-year-old girl on their screens. "Emma," Thomas warned gently, but she continued. "The brain processes multiple inputs simultaneously, not sequentially. Your model treats neural pathways like computer circuits, but they're more like music." "Like a symphony," Lily added. "Different instruments playing different parts simultaneously." Dr. Patel leaned forward. "Who exactly are these children, Thomas?" "My daughters," Thomas replied simply. "And I think you should listen to them." What followed was extraordinary. The twins, speaking in their characteristic overlapping style, outlined an entirely new approach to neural interface design. They couldn't see the shocked expressions on the engineers' faces, but Thomas could. "If what they're suggesting works," Dr. Patel finally said, "we wouldn't just solve our current problem, we'd revolutionize the entire field." When the call ended, Thomas sat in stunned silence. The girls waited patiently for his response. "How did you understand all that?" he finally asked. "That's cutting-edge neuroscience." "We read your company's research papers," Emma said. "Mrs. Bennett helped us access your digital library," Lily added. "We hope that was okay." Thomas laughed, a mixture of disbelief and pride washing over him. "More than okay. You just saved a $200 million project." Later that evening, Mrs. Bennett found Thomas sitting alone in his study, staring thoughtfully at a photograph of himself at the twins' age, a serious boy with determined eyes and second-hand clothes. "Those girls are remarkable," she said, setting down his evening tea. "But they need more than just educational opportunities, sir." Thomas nodded slowly. "I know. I thought I was rescuing them, giving them a chance at a better life." He looked up at his housekeeper, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "But I'm starting to realize something unexpected." "What's that, sir?" "They might be the ones rescuing me." The spring rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the windows of Harrington Estate. 6 months had passed since the twins arrived, transforming the once silent mansion into a home filled with curious questions and unexpected discoveries. Thomas paused at the doorway of the girls' bedroom, listening to their animated conversation about advanced geometry. Their room had evolved into a wonderland of texture and sound. Wall hangings with different fabrics, wind chimes that marked the location of windows, and shelves lined with Braille books and tactile puzzles. "Girls, Mrs. Bennett says it's time to organize your closets," Thomas announced. "Apparently your system is giving her headaches." The twins giggled, their identical faces turning toward his voice with uncanny precision. "Our system is perfectly logical," Emma protested, "just not visible to the untrained eye," Lily added with a grin. Thomas helped them sort through their belongings, marveling at how they developed a complex organizational method based on texture and smell rather than color or visual appeal. As they worked, his hand brushed against something solid hidden beneath a stack of sweaters, an ornate wooden box he'd never seen before. "What's this?" he asked, lifting it carefully. The twins grew suddenly quiet. "It's from before," Emma said softly. "From our parents," Lily clarified. "The only thing we brought from our old home." Thomas opened the box gently, finding it filled with letters, small trinkets, and what appeared to be research papers. "May I?" he asked, respecting their privacy. The twins nodded in unison. Thomas carefully unfolded the first letter, recognizing the handwriting of a scientist accustomed to precise notation. "My dearest daughters, today you turned 5. And your mother and I watched in amazement as you completed the cognitive puzzles meant for children 3 times your age." Emma finished first as always, but then whispered something to Lily, who immediately found a more elegant solution. Letter after letter chronicled the twins' extraordinary development. Their father, Dr. Robert Spencer, had been a brilliant computer scientist specializing in advanced algorithms. Their mother, Dr. Eliza Spencer, was a pioneering neuroscientist studying how the brain processes information. "Your parents were documenting your abilities," Thomas said, awestruck. They recognized how special you were from the beginning. Dad called us his quantum computers, Emma said quietly. Mom said our brains found shortcuts the rest of the world couldn't see, Lily added. Among the papers, Thomas found research notes suggesting the Spencers had been developing revolutionary theories about complementary cognition, using their own daughters as inspiration. They were brilliant, Thomas murmured. Just like you. They were working on something important, Emma said. Something about neural networks modeled after how Lily and I think together. Thomas picked up a small USB drive nestled among the letters. Do you know what's on this? The twins shook their heads. We couldn't access it without help, Lily explained. That night after the girls were asleep, Thomas examined the contents of the drive. It contained years of research data, simulations, and personal videos the Spencers had made for their daughters. In one recording, Robert Spencer looked directly into the camera, his expression serious. Emma, Lily, if you're watching this, something has happened to us. Your mother and I always knew your minds were extraordinary. The work we've done documenting your cognitive processes could change how we understand human intelligence. But remember, you are not experiments. You are our beloved daughters. Your gifts are yours to share or keep private as you choose. Thomas sat back, emotion washing over him. These weren't just random orphans he'd impulsively adopted. Their parents had been pioneers whose work might have revolutionized multiple fields, work that died with them in that tragic accident. Except it hadn't died. It lived on in Emma and Lily. The next morning, Thomas showed the twins their parents' videos. As they listened to their mother and father's voices, tears slid silently down their cheeks. The first time Thomas had seen them cry. They loved you very much, Thomas said softly. And they were incredibly proud of you. Thank you for finding this, Emma whispered, her hand finding his. For giving them back to us, Lily added, reaching for his other hand. In that moment, something shifted between them, a trust deeper than gratitude, a connection stronger than circumstance. They were becoming a family. Summer heat blanketed Harrington Estate, but the atmosphere inside the mansion had grown noticeably cooler. Marcus Reynolds sat across from Thomas in the garden pavilion, his expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. The board is worried, Thomas. First the adoption, now you're implementing untested algorithms developed by children into our flagship products? Marcus leaned forward. People are starting to talk. Thomas remained impassive. The neural interface project is ahead of schedule, thanks to the girls' input. Our preliminary testing shows a 40% improvement in processing speeds. That's precisely my point, Marcus countered, lowering his voice. These aren't normal children. The press is asking questions about how two blind 9-year-olds could possibly contribute to cutting-edge technology. Some are suggesting you're exploiting them. That's absurd, Thomas snapped. Marcus shrugged. Is it? You've filed 3 patents in the past month based on their work. The timing seems convenient. After Marcus left, Thomas found himself unable to shake the conversation. Had he unconsciously seen the twins as assets rather than children? The thought disturbed him deeply. His concerns only grew when Ms. Peterson, the social worker assigned to their case, arrived for her monthly visit. Mr. Harrington, I've received some troubling reports, she began, her clipboard clutched tightly. There are allegations that you're using the girls' intellectual abilities for corporate gain. That's ridiculous, Thomas protested. They're brilliant. They want to contribute. I'm simply nurturing their gifts, Ms. Peterson frowned. Children need to be children first, Mr. Harrington. I understand the Spencer twins have exceptional abilities, but they also need normalcy, friends their own age, experiences beyond corporate boardrooms. They have everything they could possibly want, Thomas insisted. Except perhaps the assurance that you want them for who they are, not what they can do, she replied gently. That evening, Thomas noticed the twins were unusually quiet during dinner. Their synchronized movements seemed mechanical rather than fluid. Their responses clipped. Is everything all right? He finally asked. The twins tilted their heads in that characteristic way that indicated their silent communication. "We overheard Ms. Peterson today," Emma admitted, "about using us for our abilities." Thomas felt his heart sink. "You know that's not true. We don't mind helping with your work," Lily said carefully. But what?" Thomas prompted when she hesitated. "Would you still want us if we couldn't do math?" Emma asked bluntly. "If we couldn't solve your company's problems?" The question hit Thomas like a physical blow. "Of course I would," he said immediately. "You're not here because of what you can do. You're here because—" He stopped, suddenly realizing he had never properly articulated his feelings for them, even to himself. "Because what?" Lily pressed, her unseeing eyes somehow finding his with unerring precision. Thomas swallowed hard. "Because you two have brought meaning to my life in a way nothing else ever has," he said quietly. "Because this house wasn't a home until you arrived." The twins remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Later that night, Thomas overheard them whispering in their room. "What if Marcus is right?" Emma's voice drifted through the partially open door. "What if he only sees us as assets?" "He said he cares about us," Lily countered. "Our parents cared about us too," Emma said softly. "But they also documented everything we did. Sometimes I felt like a science experiment." Thomas withdrew silently, a profound sadness washing over him. For the first time since the adoption, he questioned whether he was truly capable of being the father these extraordinary children needed, or if he was simply repeating patterns of exploitation dressed up as opportunity. The tension at Harrington estate stretched into its second week. Thomas had thrown himself into work while the twins retreated further into their private world of equations and silent communication. Mrs. Bennet watched the growing distance between them with increasing concern. "You're all being ridiculous," she finally declared one morning, setting down breakfast plates with unusual force. "3 brilliant minds in this house, and not one of you smart enough to talk to each other." Before anyone could respond, the security system announced a visitor at the gate, Dr. Eleanor Wright, requesting to see the twins. Thomas met the visitor in his study, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a determined expression. "I was a colleague of Robert and Eliza Spencer," she explained. "I've been abroad for 2 years on a research fellowship. When I returned and heard about the girls—" Her voice trailed off as she studied Thomas. "I had to see them." Thomas regarded her cautiously. "The girls have been through a lot. If you're here to cause more disruption—" "I'm here to fulfill a promise," Dr. Wright interrupted, "to their parents." When the twins entered the study, their reaction to Dr. Wright's voice was immediate, their faces lighting up with recognition. "Aunt Ellie!" they exclaimed in unison, moving unerringly toward her. Thomas watched their joyful reunion with mixed emotions. Here was someone who shared a connection with the girls that predated him, a link to their past he couldn't provide. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Dr. Wright told the twins, holding their hands tightly, "and I think they would approve of your new home." "You do?" Emma asked hesitantly. Dr. Wright nodded, then seemed to remember they couldn't see the gesture. "Yes. In fact, Robert and Eliza admired Mr. Harrington's work greatly." Thomas looked up in surprise. "They knew of me?" "They followed your career with interest," Dr. Wright confirmed, "particularly your ethical approach to technology development. Eliza once said if anything happened to them, she hoped someone like Thomas Harrington might mentor their daughters someday." The twins turned toward Thomas, their expressions a mixture of surprise and hope. "Really?" Lily whispered. Dr. Wright reached into her bag. "I have something for you. Your mother gave it to me before the accident for safekeeping." She handed Thomas a small voice recorder. "She said if anything happened, I should make sure the girls received this when the time was right." With trembling fingers, Thomas pressed play. Eliza Spencer's warm voice filled the room. "Emma, Lily, our precious girls. If you're listening to this, then Dad and I are gone. We've arranged for Dr. Wright to find you when you're ready. You have extraordinary gifts that the world needs, but more importantly, you have each other. We've watched Thomas Harrington's work for years, his commitment to using technology to help people, not exploit them. If by some miracle your paths cross with his, trust him. He's one of the good ones. Remember, your minds are remarkable, but your hearts are your true compass. We love you always." Silence filled the room as the recording ended. Thomas looked at the twins, tears streaming down their faces. Without hesitation, he crossed the room and knelt before them. "I never knew your parents, but I promise you this. I will honor their legacy by being the father they would have wanted for you, not because of what your minds can do, but because of who you are." "We believe you," the twins said in unison, reaching for his hands. Dr. Wright smiled through her own tears. Robert and Eliza would be at peace knowing their daughters found their way to you. As they walked Dr. Wright to the door, Thomas felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The doubt that had plagued him was replaced with renewed purpose, not just to nurture the twins' extraordinary abilities, but to give them the childhood their parents would have wanted. The autumn months brought dramatic changes to Harrington Estate. Thomas had reduced his corporate responsibilities to dedicate more time to the twins, who had just celebrated their 10th birthday with a small gathering that included Dr. Wright, Mrs. Bennett, and a few carefully selected children from the specialized school they now attended part-time. "Dad," Emma called out from the library, the word still new enough to make Thomas's heart skip a beat. They had begun using it a month after Dr. Wright's visit, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. Thomas found both girls hunched over a Braille book, their fingers flying across the pages. "What have you two discovered now?" "We want to teach you Braille," Lily announced. "We've developed a new method that should help you learn twice as fast." Thomas chuckled. "I've been meaning to learn, but with everything at work." "You need to know it," Emma interrupted, her tone uncharacteristically serious. "It's important to us." Over the next few weeks, Thomas dedicated every evening to his Braille lessons. The twins proved to be demanding but effective teachers, creating tactile games and memory exercises that gradually built his proficiency. His fingers grew more sensitive as they learned to distinguish the subtle patterns of raised dots. "You're catching on quickly," Lily observed one evening as Thomas successfully decoded a complex passage. "Almost as if your brain is rewiring itself." "Like ours did," Emma added thoughtfully, adapting to new input methods. Thomas looked at them with sudden insight. "This is about more than just communication, isn't it? You're trying to help me understand how you experience the world." The twins smiled identical smiles. "We thought you might figure that out eventually," they said in unison. One crisp October weekend, Thomas took the twins to the family's lakeside cabin. It was a simpler place than the estate, rustic and isolated, with no staff and minimal technology. The girls delighted in exploring the new environment, creating fresh mental maps of the unfamiliar space. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered over the lake. "Storm's coming," Thomas observed, helping the girls set up a puzzle on the cabin's old wooden table. "Might lose power for a bit." "We don't mind the dark," Emma said with a smile. "We're quite familiar with it," Lily added wryly. When the storm hit an hour later, it was more intense than Thomas had anticipated. Wind howled around. The cabin's eaves, rain lashed at the windows, and as predicted, the lights flickered and died. Thomas fumbled for his phone's flashlight only to find the battery nearly dead. "Stay where you are, girls," he called out, suddenly aware of how vulnerable he felt in the total darkness. "I'll find the emergency kit." "We can help," came Emma's calm voice from across the room. "We know exactly where everything is." Before Thomas could protest, he felt a small hand slip into his. 15 steps forward, Lily instructed. "There's a low table about halfway, step around it to the left." With remarkable precision, the twins guided Thomas through the pitch-black cabin, warning him of obstacles, counting steps, and describing the layout from memory. "How are you doing this?" Thomas asked in amazement as they successfully navigated to the kitchen. "We counted and memorized the steps when we arrived," Emma explained. "It's what we always do in a new place." "Third drawer from the right," Lily directed. "That's where you put the flashlights earlier." As Thomas's fingers found the flashlights exactly where Lily had indicated, a profound realization washed over him. For a few moments, he had experienced the world as they did every day, navigating by touch, sound, and memory rather than sight. "You two are extraordinary," he said softly. "Not because of your mathematical abilities or memory, but because of how you've adapted to see the world differently." The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin the three of them sat comfortably, in the darkness, sharing stories by the light of a single flashlight. For the first time, Thomas didn't feel the need to fill the silence or provide entertainment. The twins took turns reciting poetry from memory, creating word games and describing how they perceived the storm through sound and subtle air pressure changes. "The rain is easing," Lily noted eventually. "The droplets are hitting the roof at longer intervals. And the wind has shifted direction," Emma added. "It's coming from the north now." Thomas marveled at their awareness. "You notice things I never would." "That's what we were trying to show you with the braille," Emma explained. "Everyone experiences the world differently. Sometimes limitations become strengths," Lily concluded. When the power finally returned hours later, Thomas felt an odd sense of loss. The darkness had created an intimacy, a shared experience that daylight couldn't quite match. The symbolic nature of the evening wasn't lost on him. His daughters had guided him through darkness, just as he hoped to guide them through life. Next morning, Thomas woke to find a note in carefully formed braille beside his bed. Using his newly acquired skills, he slowly deciphered the message. "Thank you for letting us lead sometimes, that's what family means. E and L." He traced the dots again and again, emotion welling in his throat. These remarkable children had taught him more about seeing clearly than a lifetime of success ever had. The years passed swiftly at Harrington Estate. The twins, now 15, had blossomed into confident young women whose extraordinary intellects were matched by growing emotional maturity. Their complementary cognitive abilities had only strengthened with age. Emma's sequential thinking paired perfectly with Lily's pattern recognition, allowing them to solve problems that stumped even Thomas's most brilliant engineers. On a crisp, autumn morning, Thomas prepared for a critical international trip to finalize the largest acquisition in his company's history. He'd be unreachable for nearly 24 hours during the transatlantic flight and subsequent negotiations. "You'll be all right with Mrs. Bennett?" Thomas asked, embracing each girl goodbye. "We'll be fine, Dad," Emma assured him. "Focus on your meeting," Lily added. "The Nakamura acquisition is important." Thomas smiled at their awareness of his business affairs. While he never deliberately involved them in corporate matters, their extraordinary hearing and memory meant they absorbed conversations and phone calls throughout the house. "Marcus will be overseeing operations while I'm gone," Thomas explained. "Contact him if there's any emergency." A flicker of concern passed between the twins at the mention of Marcus, who had maintained a polite but cold relationship with them over the years. After Thomas departed, the twins retreated to their shared study, a room filled with advanced computing equipment adapted, with braille interfaces and audio enhancements. They were working on a personal project when Emma suddenly paused, her head tilting in that distinctive way that indicated she'd noticed something unusual. "Lily," she whispered, "are you hearing this?" They both fell silent, focusing their enhanced senses on the data streams flowing through their specialized equipment. As daughters of the company's owner, they had authorized access to monitoring systems, a privilege Thomas had granted them after they'd developed security improvements the previous year. "The data packets," Lily murmured. "They're showing abnormal latency patterns." "Not random," Emma added urgently. "It's systematic, like a coordinated infiltration," they concluded together. The twins worked frantically, tracing the anomalies through the company's vast network. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. A sophisticated cyber attack was quietly penetrating Harrington Tech's most sensitive systems, harvesting proprietary data while planting destructive code set to activate in 12 hours. "We need to alert security," Emma said, reaching for the phone. Their call to the company's cybersecurity division was intercepted by none other than Marcus Reynolds. "What exactly are you two doing accessing corporate systems?" he demanded. "There's an attack in progress," Lily explained urgently. "We've detected a pattern." "Stop right there," Marcus interrupted. "Your father gives you far too much freedom with company resources. Children shouldn't be playing with critical infrastructure during a major acquisition. But we've found evidence, Emma persisted. I don't have time for this, Marcus snapped. The system is secure. I've personally reviewed the security protocols. Stay out of company business until your father returns. The line went dead, leaving the twins in stunned silence. He didn't even listen, Lily whispered, and Dad is unreachable for at least 20 more hours, Emma added grimly. The twins faced an impossible dilemma. The attack was accelerating, targeting systems containing not just corporate secrets, but customer data for millions of people. In 12 hours, it would trigger a catastrophic breach that could destroy everything their father had built. What do we do? Lily asked, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Emma reached for her sister's hand, their fingers intertwining in perfect synchronization. What Dad would want us to do, she said firmly. Protect the company, whatever it takes. And with that decision, the twins embarked on a race against time that would test not just their extraordinary minds, but their courage and loyalty to the family they had chosen. The twins' specialized computer lab hummed with activity as Emma and Lily worked in perfect synchronization. Their fingers flew across Braille keyboards while custom audio interfaces provided real-time feedback, reading code and data patterns aloud at speeds incomprehensible to ordinary listeners. The attack is evolving, Emma noted, her expression tense. It's adaptive, learning from each security measure it encounters. There's an elegant pattern to it, Lily added, her head tilted in concentration. Almost familiar-like. They paused, simultaneously the realization hitting them both. It's based on Dad's original encryption algorithms, they said in unison. Someone who intimately knows Dad's work designed this, Emma concluded. That's why it's bypassing all standard security protocols. Marcus, Lily suggested. Emma shook her head. Not sophisticated enough. He might have provided access, but this has the fingerprints of a genius. With each passing minute, the attack penetrated deeper into Harrington Tech's infrastructure. Customer data, proprietary research, financial records, all would be compromised when the destructive payload triggered. We need to develop a countermeasure, Lily decided. Something that thinks the way we do, not sequentially like conventional security systems. A dual processing defense algorithm, Emma agreed, like our minds working together. The twins began coding furiously, developing an entirely new approach to cybersecurity based on their unique complementary cognition. Emma structured the sequential elements while Lily built pattern recognition frameworks that could anticipate the attack's next moves. 4 hours into their work, Mrs. Bennet knocked tentatively on their door. Mr. Reynolds is on the phone, she announced. He's quite insistent. The twins exchanged a concerned glance before putting the call on speaker. I've received reports of unauthorized access from your residence, Marcus began without preamble, his voice cold. I've revoked all your permissions effective immediately. Marcus, you don't understand, Emma started. No, you don't understand, he interrupted. Your father has indulged your meddling for years, but I will not. This acquisition is too important to risk with your amateur games. There's a massive attack underway, Lily tried explaining. We've developed a solution that could— Enough, Marcus snapped. I've implemented a security lockdown. Any further attempts to access company systems will be considered a criminal breach. Is that clear? The line went dead before they could respond. He just cut off our only direct access, Emma whispered, stunned. And we can't complete our defense algorithm without it, Lily added. The twins sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The attack continued, invisible to conventional security systems, with less than 6 hours remaining before it unleashed its destruction. We have a choice to make, Emma finally said. Follow the rules and watch Dad's company be destroyed. Or break them to save it, Lily finished. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on them. Their father had always emphasized integrity and respecting proper channels, but he'd also taught them that sometimes protecting what matters requires difficult choices. If we do nothing, millions of people's data will be compromised, Emma reasoned, and the company Dad built from nothing will be crippled, Lily added. He'd want us to act, they concluded together. Their decision made, the twins initiated their riskiest plan yet. Using specialized equipment they'd developed for their personal projects, they created an unauthorized backdoor into the company's systems. It was technically illegal, exactly what Marcus had warned against, but they saw no alternative. "This goes against everything Dad taught us about proper procedures," Lily said hesitantly, her finger hovering over the execute command. "But it honors everything he taught us about responsibility and protecting others," Emma countered. With a deep breath, they activated the connection. Their defense algorithm began uploading to the core systems, racing against the ticking clock of the attack's final countdown. "Whatever happens," Emma said softly, "we're in this together." "As always," Lily agreed, taking her sister's hand. Outside, the sun set on Harrington Estate as two 15-year-old girls fought a silent battle that would determine the fate of everything their father had built. Thomas Harrington's private jet touched down 6 hours earlier than scheduled. The Nakamura negotiations had concluded with unexpected efficiency, allowing him to return home ahead of his itinerary. As the car pulled up to Harrington Estate, he noticed unusual activity, security personnel moving with urgency, lights blazing from every window despite the early hour. Mrs. Bennett met him at the door, her face tight with worry. "Thank goodness you're back, sir. There's been an incident." Before she could explain further, Thomas's phone rang. "Marcus Reynolds." "Thomas, you need to get to headquarters immediately." Marcus's voice was laced with barely contained fury. "Your daughters have committed a serious breach of company security protocols. They've infiltrated core systems without authorization and implemented unauthorized code. I've already contacted legal." "Where are Emma and Lily now?" Thomas interrupted, a cold fear gripping him. "They're being detained in the executive conference room," Marcus replied. "Thomas, this is corporate espionage, regardless of who committed it. The board is assembling for an emergency session." 20 minutes later, Thomas strode into Harrington Tech headquarters. The atmosphere was chaotic. Security teams, IT specialists, and executives huddled in tense groups. He made his way directly to the conference room where he found his daughters seated alone, their expressions resolute despite the gravity of the situation. "Dad," they said in unison, relief evident in their voices. "Are you both all right?" Thomas asked, embracing them quickly. Before they could respond, the door opened as Marcus entered, followed by the board members and chief security officer. "Thomas, I know they're your daughters, but this breach cannot be overlooked," Marcus began, his tone professionally sympathetic yet unyielding. "They bypassed multiple security protocols, infiltrated restricted systems, and deployed unauthorized code throughout our network. The timing during our most sensitive acquisition suggests this wasn't just teenage rebellion." Thomas turned to his daughters. "Explain." The twins straightened, their unseeing eyes directed toward the assembled executives with eerie precision. "We detected an advanced, persistent threat within the company's network," Emma began calmly. "Conventional security systems failed to identify it because it was based on Dad's original encryption algorithms," Lily continued. "Someone with intimate knowledge of Harrington Tech's architecture designed it. We attempted to alert security but were dismissed," Emma added. "By me," Marcus interjected, "because children shouldn't have access to our systems in the first place. When we realized the attack would trigger in hours, compromising customer data and intellectual property, we had to act," Lily explained. "So you hacked your own father's company?" one board member asked incredulously. "We created a defense algorithm based on our complementary cognitive approach," Emma responded. "It's already neutralized 93% of the threat." The chief security officer, who had been silently reviewing data on his tablet, looked up. "There. Correct. We've confirmed a sophisticated attack was underway. If it had triggered as planned, we would have lost everything, including the Nakamura deal. Their intervention appears to have saved us from catastrophic damage." A stunned silence fell over the room. Marcus's face darkened with fury as he realized the twins had been right all along. "The question remains," Thomas said finally, his voice carrying quiet authority. Who had the expertise and access to orchestrate such an attack in the first place? An attack based on my original algorithms? All eyes slowly turned toward Marcus, whose composure had begun to crack under the weight of collective suspicion. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "You're going to take the word of two blind teenagers over your most loyal executive?" "No, Marcus," Thomas replied calmly. "I'm going to trust the evidence. And the evidence suggests we should take a much closer look at your recent activities." The confrontation had only begun, but in that moment, the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The twins sat quietly, their mission accomplished despite the storm that still raged around them. The fallout from the twins' intervention sent shockwaves through Harrington Technologies. For 2 weeks, forensic cybersecurity teams combed through digital evidence, following the trail that Emma and Lily had uncovered. The board had placed Marcus on administrative leave pending investigation, his office sealed and access credentials revoked. Thomas sat in his home office reviewing the preliminary findings with growing disbelief. The attack had been meticulously planned over months with components that could only have been developed with insider knowledge. "Dad?" The twins' voices interrupted his thoughts as they entered the room. At 15, they had grown into poised young women, their movements confident, despite their blindness. "The board meeting is in 2 hours," Emma reminded him. "Are you ready?" Lily asked, her voice gentle but concerned. Thomas sighed heavily. "As ready as I can be. The evidence against Marcus is substantial but not yet conclusive. We need to proceed carefully." The twins exchanged their characteristic silent communication before Emma spoke again. "There's something we haven't told you, something we found during the breach. We discovered a hidden server," Lily continued, "containing communications between Marcus and several external developers. They weren't just trying to steal company data," Emma explained. "They were specifically targeting our algorithm." "Our algorithm?" Thomas questioned. "The complementary cognition framework we developed," Lily clarified. "The one based on how our minds work together." Thomas felt his blood run cold. The twins had developed their unique approach to problem solving into a groundbreaking algorithm that could revolutionize artificial intelligence. They had worked on it privately, with his blessing, but outside the company's formal research channels. Marcus claimed the algorithm belongs to Harrington Tech, Emma stated flatly. He was using legal precedent that any intellectual property, developed by dependents of company officers using company resources, is company property. "He's preparing a legal case," Lily added, "to claim ownership of our work, even if he's dismissed from the company." Thomas stood abruptly, anger rising within him. "That's absurd. The algorithm is your creation based on your unique cognitive processes." "The law isn't clear," Emma replied softly. "We researched the precedents. There have been similar cases, where companies successfully claimed ownership of innovations developed by minors living in executives' homes," Lily explained. Thomas paced the room, mind racing. So that's his endgame. Even if he loses his position, he aims to control the most valuable intellectual property you've created. "We've been thinking," the twins said simultaneously. Then Emma continued alone. "There might be a way to protect both the company and our work." At the emergency board meeting 2 hours later, Thomas faced a table of grim-faced executives. The evidence against Marcus was presented methodically by the head of security. Access logs, unusual communications, suspicious financial transactions. Marcus sat at the far end, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear. When the presentation concluded, Marcus's lawyer stood. "While my client categorically denies involvement in any attack, we wish to direct the board's attention to a more pressing matter of intellectual property rights." Thomas felt a surge of fury as the lawyer outlined exactly what the twins had predicted: a legal claim to their algorithm based on their status as his dependents. Furthermore, the lawyer concluded, "We have evidence that these algorithms were tested using company resources, further cementing Harrington Tech's ownership claim, regardless of any employment decisions made today regarding Mr. Reynolds." Thomas stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "Before we address these claims, I'd like to call in 2 key witnesses." At his nod, the doors opened, and Emma and Lily entered, walking confidently to the front of the room. "The board recognizes Emma and Lily Harrington," the chairperson announced. "Actually," Thomas interrupted, "that's precisely what we need to discuss." The boardroom fell silent as Thomas Harrington stood beside his daughters. His next words would alter the course of everything he had built over decades. "What I'm about to tell you wasn't a decision I made lightly," Thomas began. 3 days ago, after discovering Marcus's intentions, I officially emancipated Emma and Lily. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Marcus's lawyer leaned forward, suddenly alert. With the guidance of top legal counsel and the full support of their caseworker, the courts expedited the process based on their extraordinary circumstances. Thomas continued. "Emma and Lily Spencer Harrington are now legally independent." Marcus rose to his feet. "This is a transparent attempt to circumvent company ownership claims. The algorithms were developed while they were your dependents using company resources." Thomas smiled calmly. "That's where you're wrong, Marcus. The twins never used company resources for their algorithm development. They built their own computing system, funded by the trust I established for them years ago. Furthermore," Emma added, her voice clear and confident, "we filed for a provisional patent last year, well before any breach occurred. Under our own names," Lily continued, "with supporting documentation proving original development." The board members exchanged glances as the implications became clear. Marcus's lawyer whispered urgently to him, but the damage was done. Thomas wasn't finished. "There's more. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Harrington Technologies." Gasps filled the room. For 20 years, Thomas Harrington had been the heart and soul of the company. His departure was unthinkable. "My daughters and I are establishing a new venture," Thomas announced, "focused on assistive technologies and cognitive computing solutions. We will, of course, maintain our shareholding in Harrington Tech, but leadership should pass to someone with fresh vision." Marcus's expression shifted from shock to calculating opportunity. Thomas recognized the look, already plotting how to position himself as the successor. "And finally," Thomas said, "we've provided the board with comprehensive evidence of Marcus's involvement in the cyber attack. The authorities have been notified and will be arriving shortly." Marcus's face drained of color. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," Emma interjected, "we can. Your attack contained signature code elements from your previous projects. And the external developers you hired left quite a paper trail," Lily added. "Financial transactions, encrypted communications, all recovered during our counteroffensive." Within hours, Marcus Reynolds was escorted from the building by federal agents while Thomas and the twins watched from Thomas's former office. The board had unanimously voted to press charges, the damage to company trust and potential loss too severe to ignore. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Emma asked as they gathered their personal belongings. "You built this company from nothing." Thomas gazed around the office where he'd spent countless hours pursuing success. The view from the top floor had once represented everything he valued: achievement, recognition, control. "I've never been more certain," he replied. "What we're building together matters more than what I built alone." 2 weeks later, Spencer Harrington Cognitive Solutions opened its doors in a renovated industrial space across town. Half the building was dedicated to research and development. The other half housed a training center for visually impaired youth interested in technology careers. On opening day, Thomas watched with pride as Emma and Lily led tours for potential investors and community partners. Their algorithm, now secured under their own names, had already attracted attention from healthcare providers and educational institutions worldwide. "They offered me the chairman position back at Harrington Tech," Thomas mentioned to Mrs. Bennett, who had insisted on following the family to their new venture. "And?" she prompted, knowing the answer. Thomas smiled, watching his daughters confidently navigating their new kingdom. "Some things are worth more than empire building." The sleek helicopter descended toward the gleaming Harrington Technologies headquarters, its distinctive blue and silver livery catching the morning sunlight. Inside, Emma and Lily Spencer Harrington sat in comfortable silence, their matching business attire and poised demeanor reflecting the powerful executives they had become. At 45, the twins had maintained their extraordinary connection, still finishing each other's thoughts, still operating with that unique complementary cognition that had revolutionized multiple industries. Their company, Spencer Harrington Cognitive Solutions, had grown from a modest startup into a global leader in assistive technology, with products that had transformed the lives of millions with disabilities worldwide. 3 minutes to landing, announced the pilot. Emma reached over to squeeze her sister's hand. Are you thinking about that first day? The mathematics competition? Lily smiled. When Dad found us? Always. The headquarters they approached had once been Thomas's domain, but today it represented something else entirely. The culmination of a journey that had begun with 2 blind orphans and one man's impulsive decision. On the rooftop landing pad, a small welcoming committee waited. Among them stood Thomas Harrington, now a distinguished 65, his hair silver but his posture still commanding. Beside him, Mrs. Bennett, remarkably spry for her advanced years, clutched her handbag with anticipation. As the twins emerged from the helicopter, they moved with perfect coordination, their white canes barely necessary after decades of navigating this world they had helped reshape. My girls, Thomas embraced them both, his voice thick with emotion. Today of all days, your mother and father would be so proud. The acquisition papers had been signed the previous week, but today's ceremony would make it official. Spencer Harrington Cognitive Solutions was acquiring Harrington Technologies, bringing the corporate saga full circle in the most poetic way imaginable. In the executive boardroom where Marcus Reynolds had once plotted against them, the twins now stood as the new owners. Marcus himself, released from prison years ago but never restored to his former glory, had been invited as a matter of protocol. He sat in the back row, lines of bitterness etched deeply into his aged face. 20 years ago, many in this room laughed at the idea that 2 blind girls could contribute anything of value to this company. Emma began, addressing the assembled executives and press. Today we return not just as businesswomen, but as living proof that different perspectives create stronger solutions, Lily continued. Together, they announced their vision, transforming Marcus's former office into the Spencer Innovation Center, a technology incubator specifically designed for engineers with disabilities. The future headquarters would feature cutting-edge accessibility, a testament to their belief that limitations often sparked the greatest innovations. After the ceremony, Thomas found his daughters in his old office, their fingers tracing the bar, view they could not see but had memorized from countless descriptions. Your journey has come full circle, he said softly. Our journey, they corrected him in unison. What began with one man's compassion, Emma said, ends with an empire rebuilt on empathy, Lily finished. Thomas smiled at the extraordinary women who had once been frightened children. In them, he saw not just the reflection of his greatest decision but the promise of a future where differences were not weaknesses, but remarkable strengths waiting to be discovered. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, unaware that its skyline had been forever changed by a moment of human connection between a lonely millionaire and 2 brilliant minds that simply needed someone to see their light.